Hi, my name is Ken Anderberg. I've been a journalist for about 5 decades now. I'm currently living in Thailand. I spent 14 months in Vietnam. I was drafted in Vietnam War, like a lot of people were. I spent 5 months on the front lines. What we were doing was patrolling the A Shau Valley, which is in northern South Vietnam, just south of the DMZ. My younger brother was just a little bit north of me in a Marine unit, really almost on the DMZ. We would go out for a week at a time, usually, and full packs, maybe 80, 100 pounds on our back, going up and down mountains, hills, across rivers, through jungles, hacking through jungles. There were some officers who were very gung-ho and didn't mind using their men to take positions. Hamburger Hill is a perfect example. Although the firepower of the helicopters was used there as well as artillery. But the men on the ground were the ones that paid the price. There were other officers who understood that they didn't want people dying when they had military weapons that nobody else had that they could use. The officers that didn't understand that dynamic, especially with the draftees who didn't want to die, were there because they were forced to, like me, often faced some possible retribution from the rank and file of the military. After 5 months, I was assigned back to our base camp, Camp Evans, which is north of WWII, Phu Bai, as an awards and decorations clerk. I think they were using my writing as a newspaper writer as a basis to give me that job. I'm not sure why, but they just assigned me that. The job basically was to write up action reports to warrant giving people awards, medals. Usually they were officers, and often they were enhanced action reports, made up if you want it. For example, I'll give one for Colonel Honeycutt, the Hamburger Hill commander, who got a Silver Star for action on Hamburger Hill. My comrades in my unit told me this story because I was gone. They came back and visited me. One day they were sitting around an abandoned bunker complex, and this colonel flew his helicopter, and he flew his own helicopter, landed, and proceeded to go to the different bunkers and throw hand grenades in them. There was nobody there. For this, he had his aide ask for a Silver Star award, and he got it. That's, again, the kind of things that ate at me, that I just I could not deal with. Honeycutt was the subject of rumors of a reward for somebody to frag his hut. Fragging was a tactic that was used back then. It may be overblown as it was used as a tactic. It was used a few times, I guess, where enlisted men were upset with their officers and would throw a hand fragmentation grenade under their hut because it usually had open space under there. So it's called fragging. Honeycutt was one of those targets. And my buddies had told me that about this reward of $10,000, and I had no idea who was going to pay it. It was just a figment of somebody's imagination. Just their expression of their anger about this guy and what he did on Hamburger Hill. GI Says was born from opportunity, boredom, and a desire to speak my mind about certain things. I was working in an office at Camp Evans with 2 other GIs. One was my supervisor, and I had a mimeograph machine at my disposal. We didn't have fax machines. We didn't have printers. This was before that time. There's obviously no internet. And I would make different documents with a mimeograph machine, so I had a little bit of knowledge of how to use it. When I had all these things I wanted to say to the audience I wanted to reach, I thought, why not? And I came up with a name just out of the blue, GI Says. It just seemed to say what it was. This is a GI saying something. Created a logo for that. It was a front and back mimeograph sheet. That's all it was. And it even had errors on it. I'd cross out stuff. I might do a mimeograph sheet 5 times before I would get it close to being right because I'd make so many errors. And if you made an error, you had to start over. You spelled something wrong, you had to start over. You couldn't change, you couldn't erase it because it's a carbon paper situation. But I don't know of any other. I never saw any other publication, never heard of any other publication like GI Says during my tenure there. I've never read about another publication like that since then. However, from what I have read, the military was squelching any such information from getting out. I did not know about all the in-military protests, the in-military refusals to go into combat. I did not know about the extent of the fragging situation because we didn't have the communications. We didn't know what was going on in other parts of the country, and the military didn't want us to know what's going on in other parts of the country, and they didn't want the American public to know because we know how that was being accepted back in the States. There's really the impetus for me to do GI Says was this story. I had a lot of other little anecdotes I wanted to talk about, like guys walking around with jump wing insignia on their uniforms even though they hadn't gone to jump school, just trying to impress people because they were 101st, they put the jump wings on and they hadn't been to jump school. I had not been to jump school, I did not wear the wings. Stuff like that. Air conditioning for the officers' huts, no air conditioning for the grunts, that sort of thing. But then we had this big reward thing for Honeycutt. His nickname was, his call sign was Blackjack. So I created an image from scratch. I drew it out of a blackjack from my card deck. I had a card deck and I was just copying it. And I did a reward poster. And I had basically a disclaimer with it that said that this is a rumor going around. Big play on the front page. It was a 2-page mimeograph newsletter, a newspaper newsletter. I gave it to my buddies, both in the rear and guys out front, and everybody loved it. So I did another one. Somewhere in there, my ego got me. We didn't get a lot of media there. We got Stars and Stripes, which is a very biased, plain vanilla publication geared towards saying the right things. I did see a copy of a newspaper from Japan, an English language newspaper from Japan called, I forget the name, and I sent them a copy of GI Says. Outside of ego, I don't know if any other reason I did it. It ended up saving my life. The second edition of GI Says also included the wanted poster, but I failed to put in the disclaimer. I'm not sure that would have helped me anyway in the long run with the military police, but that was a mistake, a journalistic mistake. Then I went on R&R to Bangkok. Left all my stuff. When I came back, I was told by my buddies that the military police were looking for me about GI Says. So I destroyed everything I could find that would implicate me. So all the copies of GI Says that I had stored were gone. There's only one copy left. It's laminated in an attic in North Carolina. I got arrested. I was being charged with soliciting the death of an officer, which carried a 10-year sentence in Leavenworth. Now, my father and stepmother did not know about this at all. My father would have been just mortified. A Marine veteran, he would have a Korea veteran, he would have been mortified. They assigned me a second lieutenant lawyer who had to deal with colonels and captains, so you can imagine how the clout he didn't have. I was put on house arrest with a number of other guys waiting for court-martial. We were all waiting for court-martial. Different offenses, a lot of drug offenses or insubordination. So you had a bunch of us future criminals living in a hut together, listening to rock and roll music loud as we wanted to. Didn't have to do guard duty. We had to do garbage duty. We were the garbage men every day. So picking up 55-gallon drums of garbage and taking them to the garbage dump. After 8 or 10 weeks, my lieutenant lawyer came to me and says, there's a reporter in Way and wants to talk to you. Overseas Weekly is the name of the newspaper. Probably not in business any longer. It was a weekly. It was a newspaper. Couldn't have survived. But they got my copy. They got word that I was arrested, and they sent somebody from Japan to come interview me. So we're riding down away from Camp Evans, me and the lieutenant, and we're talking about this. And we get there, and the lieutenant tells the prosecutors, or he tells the reporter in front of the prosecutors that I was anxious to talk about this. And I was. I wasn't going to hide anything. Before I was able to talk to the reporter, the brass called me into the side room, colonel, captain, my lieutenant, and basically said, anything you say will be held against you. So I took that under consideration. And when the reporter started asking me questions, I told him that. And I said, however, I might want to talk to you in the future. That was brilliant. That was absolutely brilliant. I don't know why I did it, but it did it. Went back to base camp. 2 weeks later, the charges were dropped. The media saved my life. The media kept me out of Leavenworth, and the media has been my life ever since. Without that ego trip to send my newsletter to Japan, I would have been in Leavenworth and probably a criminal for the rest of my life. Turned out okay. I was then reassigned, and they assigned me to supply. I had no clue what they were doing. The system was terrible. Not terrible, I just couldn't understand it. So I spent the next 5 months in supply, not knowing what I was doing. They didn't care. I extended for 2 months because I was in a safe area, and they had a rule that if you came back from the States, this was basically for draftees, you came back to the States with less than 5 months to do, you got an automatic early out. So I extended my stay in Vietnam exactly enough days that when I got back, I was out. When I got discharged, I was given an honorable discharge. I was not charged with anything. The media took care of that. During my time there, I also earned a Bronze Star for action while I was out in the field. So my record is clean. I was a good soldier except for that one instance. It was maybe a dumb thing to do, but it was certainly a defining thing to do, and it worked out okay.